Okay, I want channels 18, 24, 63, 109, 87, and Weather Channel.
Great television has never been more accessible than it is right now. Greater numbers of TV shows are being produced each year, receiving higher and higher average ratings. And with on-demand streaming, the consuming of this media has never been easier. Our on-demand era has been referred to by critics as the third golden age of television. Quite rightly so. The formula is essentially perfect. But having a stereotypically British brain means that I must always look for fault in perfection. So without further ado, here are 4 reasons I hate living in the on-demand era of television.
Remember, with great content comes great responsibility.
Now, there's a lot of great TV right now, isn't there? I mean, a hell of a lot. I mean, like more TV than even a critic could get around to watching. And that's just the stuff in English. Some might consider this a good thing. It gives you choice. However, I personally believe this couldn't be further from the case. Now, as an emotional being, if there's one thing I dislike, it's feeling left out, especially when it's something my friends are involved in. Naturally, this feeling carries over to all sorts of topics, including the watching of series. But I can remedy this easily, right? I can just watch the series. Well, frustratingly, I have a lot of friends. And despite there being the odd show like Breaking Bad that everyone has seen, everyone's taste seems to be pretty split outside of that. I have one friend telling me,
"You've got to watch Narcos."
Another flabbergasted that I've never seen American Gods. A third who isn't pushy but whose opinion is equally valid, suggesting that if you get a chance, you can watch Mad Men if you want. I mean, me and my girlfriend really like it. And there's no doubt in my mind that these shows are as amazing as people tell me. This very fact is backed up by the certified fresh stamp embroidered on each Rotten Tomatoes listing. Even my most avid TV watching friends can't watch them all and knowingly opt out of fantastic television shows based on the most shallow aspects. Like, now this is a real story, opting out of watching American Horror Story because Evan Peters' gaze can make them feel a little uncomfortable at times. Or not giving The Boys the attention it deserves because they don't like superhero movies and they're not going to like this. However, I really struggle to do this because I'm open-minded to the extent that I want to give everything a chance. But the modern definition of giving a show a chance often means watching at least half a season. That's 5 whole hours. And after that time invested, I might not even decide to watch the show. Ultimately, there's just too much to watch. But I'm not surprised that there's a lot to watch. Thanks to the internet, it's easier than ever for talented writers, directors, and actors to get their names out there. And thanks to industry behemoths like Netflix and Amazon annually churning out over $10 billion into original programming. And due to the high number of these names and faces, we've passed the era where working on a TV series immediately makes you rich and famous. People now want to work on an indie series due to their passion for the filmmaking process. Everyone wants to make a show the whole world will be talking about. Everyone wants to make the next Breaking Bad. However, the icon that Breaking Bad became was not only made by the show's creators, but also by the audience who theorised about the show, endorsed the show, and forced their friends to watch the show. And thanks to the internet, all of this information was fed back in real time to the show's creators. So with great quality content comes an even greater responsibility from the viewers who decide what to watch and what to talk about. We as viewers shape the future of television and control the content that is presented to us. This power should be respected and not used shallowly, i.e. skipping out on what could have been your lifelong favourite show just because you're not open-minded enough to imagine Aidan Gillen playing anyone except for Littlefinger.
If that doesn't happen, well, then we're staring at defeat. And that defeat should not and cannot and will not be forgiven.
Copycat shows. Now, the first time I noticed a show imitating another was when I watched an episode of Vikings with my parents. Okay, wait, let me explain. You see, in the UK, there's a TV show called Gogglebox. Viewers are treated to sofa cam reactions from the worst kinds of stereotypes from around the UK to the week's greatest television. It's essentially a new wave of YouTube reaction videos becoming popular again, but on modern television and...
Give it to him! One time! Rock!
I mean, that's a story for another day. Based on the reaction of the public to some clips from Game of Thrones, my mother had decided she wasn't going to watch Game of Thrones because of the unnecessary and excessive nudity.
I can't.
Oh, she's going to take his clothes off, yeah.
Basically a porno.
Well, it's not really, Josh. Have you seen a porno?
No.
Right.
Anyway, back to the present, future, past, yeah, whatever. We were watching Vikings, and roughly 15 minutes into the episode, it became very apparent to me that Vikings relied on similar themes, a similar feel, and a similar amount of nudity to Game of Thrones. The irony was certainly lost on my mother. Clearly, the production team had taken a lot of inspiration from the show, and despite one having a fantasy setting and the other being based on true events, there was a lot of parallels between the two. Now, personally, what I believe made Game of Thrones great was how it switched the genre entirely on its head. The genre of fantasy had been brought as close to reality as it ever had been, with characters in perilous environments actually dying in a more realistic rate, and not always having the most fair or gracious deaths. Characters also act more human in their personalities, have vices, desires, and uncensored language. Everyone watched Game of Thrones with the mental benchmark of Lord of the Rings and its 12A rating. So when viewers were first treated to Season 1 of Game of Thrones, it felt fresh, it felt gritty, it felt real. Despite Vikings emulating many of the elements which made Game of Thrones feel the way it does, it feels almost like an empty shell compared to what Game of Thrones is, because it doesn't break boundaries in the fantasy genre in the same way. But, to my frustration, Vikings is still an excellent show and receives wide critical praise. There was a point in history when copying a show had to be done in a much more subtle way. Nowadays, shows very openly end up with descriptions like, "It's like Breaking Bad, but set in the 60s. Or,
Stranger Things meets The Walking Dead.
But shows being inspired by older shows is nothing new, Sam, you might cry. Yeah, that's exactly it. Older shows. Don't rip off a show that's still airing. Now, the attention span of millennials is the shortest it ever has been. Don't get me started on Zoomers. Not only getting viewers, but retaining those viewers is critical to the success of a show. Creators need to ensure you're here for the long haul, not only when next week's episode airs, but next year when the preceding season arrives. Outside of ensuring that their content was interesting, compelling, and engaging, what option do creators have? Cliffhangers. They have cliffhangers. Leaving a story on mystery unresolved to leave viewers asking to know what happens next. Some of the most famous cliffhangers and mysteries concede season finales and leave you wondering for over a year. For the majority of viewers, cliffhangers are seen as a creative storytelling mechanic, and the frustration of viewer experiences towards their use is without direction. Now, I often ask myself why these frustrations aren't directed at the creators of the show for relying on such an underhanded trope. Cliffhangers are essentially clickbait and should be treated as such. But unlike run-of-the-mill internet clickbait, where what Macaulay Culkin looks like in 2020 can be answered in a few seconds, these seasons are only released annually, and the webpage answering whether Eleven is still alive in the Upside Down could take over a year to load. Your series ends in a frustrating way, but within days our fleeting attentions have moved on. Clickbaits promote a clickbait culture of tricking viewers into coming back, not out of love, but frustration. When normal episodes consistently use cliffhangers, this can be equally annoying. By ending halfway through a dramatic scene, viewers are urged to watch just one more episode. Except the next episode will end on a similar cliffhanger, and then the next, and then you got one final big cliffhanger right at the end of the season that you can go and end your fucking life to, I don't know. Season 2 of Stranger Things used this device. Without fail, each episode ended with a dramatic cliffhanger. During my personal viewing, I worked out a way to avoid succumbing to the effects of this childish tactic. I mean, I ended my individual viewings at the pre-credits intro of the following episode. Finally, episodes felt complete and I stepped away from the show each night feeling satisfied rather than unfulfilled. I came back to the show wanting to see more rather than needing to see more. Luke Holland from The Guardian has had this to say about the power of cliffhangers.
Maybe it's a hangover from the Game of Thrones and the Breaking Bads of Teleland, but any instance now in which a show's end credits roll and your gob isn't on the floor feels a bit like a missed opportunity.
Now, there was a time in history where a show had to be really popular, or really something special, to be allowed an entire hour of a broadcasting slot. Even classics like The Twilight Zone at most got 40-minute episodes, and plots were filmed accordingly and to budget. Nowadays, in the streaming age, there is no limit on episode lengths. More television channels exist than ever before, and most of which offer an on-demand option. So primetime slots are much less valuable. The majority of modern series have hour-long episodes, and with 10 to 15 episodes per season, this is 10 to 15 hours of content per season. Now, 10 hours sounds great, but this wouldn't be an issue if it were filled with enough plot. I often find myself thinking that the story told across the season arc could be easily done in half the time. When you lack time constraints, creators no longer have to be clever about using their episode's time efficiently, so long, drawn-out sequences which provide very minimal character development or don't become relevant until later remain in just to meet that 1 hour mark. Now, I partially blame this on the rise in popularity of dramas, which seem to have the belief that provided the scene features drama, which is a vague term in itself, and is acted well, it's entertaining enough to make the final cut. And this would be enough, but nowadays, good acting is definitely our norm, and is no longer entertaining in its own right. I recently watched a show called Living With Yourself, and I found it a genuine breath of fresh air to go back to 20-minute episodes. I know, ultimately at the end, I was genuinely upset to find out that the show was over so quickly. And I get the impression that this is how you're supposed to feel after a season finale. Not like the season overstayed its welcome. The whole season was over and done with in less than 3 hours, and the result of that is that I'm genuinely excited for season 2. I can't wait to see what they're going to do with it. It seems every show from episode 1 plans to have a 5 to 6 season run. They're looking 5 years ahead from day one. Now, what's wrong with a show just telling its story in 2 seasons? Planning 5 to 6 season runs means I've heard the phrase,
"You have to wait for season 3 for it to get good,"
way too many times. Okay. So what you're saying here is, I have to sit through 20 to 30 hours of okay television, and my reward at the end is good content. My reward is good content. Other shows are excellent from season 1. Why should I watch this show? 5 to 6 seasons also means the action in season 1 can't start too strong, lest they not be able to top it as each new season continues. Okay, let's say I want to watch a show which we know in advance is going to have 5 seasons. Let's examine the 2 choices I have in watching it.
Let us ease their pain. Plan A.
Okay, plan A, I can watch season 1 now, and each preceding season as they air, years apart. and I can suffer long drafts without content, and I have to wait 5 years to finish the story. That's 5 years of my life, by the way. I don't know what I'm doing next week, let alone in 5 years' time.
Plan B.
Alright, so plan B. I can plan to watch the entire story, seasons 1 through to 5, in 5 years' time. The barrier to entry at that point would be somewhere between 50 and 75 hours long, and any and all hype present from season 1 from all my friends and the people I care about will have likely died. Now, being heavily inspired by other shows, having episodes with hour-long run lengths, and relying extremely heavily on cliffhangers are so standardized within television nowadays that potentially creators of these shows believe that these 3 things are a magic potion which instantly makes your show fantastic. This couldn't be further from the case. You don't need to rely on these kinds of tropes to be successful in modern television. Black Mirror, a personal favourite of mine, has received fantastic praise, and each season is thoroughly hyped, not only by me, but like fucking millions of other people. Black Mirror manages to create a new and compelling world and story with each episode without spending hours building exposition. It isn't locked to a 1 hour runtime, so episodes are as long as the story needs them to be. It doesn't seek to emulate another show's winning formula and pursues its own. In fact, the modern television series, Electric Dreams, is clearly Amazon's response to Netflix buying the rights to Black Mirror. Black Mirror takes inspiration from reality instead of fiction, never relies on cliffhangers to retain its audience, and is just generally a fine example of masterful content. Black Mirror, like other great shows, is successful due to its uniqueness, one that derives from the risky business of breaking conventional norms. Game of Thrones took the fantasy genre, bumped the PG rating all the way up to an 18. Breaking Bad glamorized crystal meth and made us sympathize with a drug lord. The Sopranos gave viewers the anti-hero lead and taught us that villains also make great leads. The namesake of Black Mirror derives from a darker, more distorted version of our reality. Its creator, Charlie Brooker, skillfully tells us stories set in not-so-dystopian futures, entirely based around the evolution of technologies we have only just acquired. Watching a Black Mirror episode is like seeing into one of society's morbid, but ultimately still possible futures. The quality, attention to detail, and realism act in unison to create an inimitatable experience which pushes the boundaries of modern television. This era isn't the first era to be defined as the golden age of television. Each golden age has revolutionised the medium in its own unique way and created a new standard to match. Although we're currently in the third golden age of television, I certainly hope it isn't the last. Thank you. Good night. Thank you very much for watching my video. I've been meaning to make this for 5 years or something now. I don't know. So if any of my references are a little bit outdated or something, you're like, hey, season 2 of Stranger Things was 2 years ago. Well, now you know why.